You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and he is Macon Gillespie from Ole Miss on SI. And before we get started, I do want to say the opinions I express on this show is not the opinions of Ole Miss on SI, Macon Gillespie, or their whole team, because we might be about to get into some stuff. Basically, what happened was message board trolls have just overtaken that platform. And they've realized that they can say something and people will react to it. So some idiot on a message board said that, hey, Jaxson Dart tore his ACL. And I had 3 people text him. It's like, there's no proof of that, but they just say that to make it sound legitimate. It got picked up by Message Board Genius. So it's like one troll to another troll picked it up. And then everybody that subscribes to that. So, well, is this true? Is this real? And it's absolutely ridiculous to think about this. Now, I am saying to Ole Miss people, go easy on Mississippi State fans right now. We are smack dab in the middle of their darkest timeline as we sit right now. But that doesn't excuse basically, I'm going to say wishing for injury for your rival because you were slated to win 4 games this season. There's no excuse for that. It might be your darkest timeline, but let's grow up a little bit. Anyway, John, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well, Steven. It was an interesting part of my day, I guess, having to
Deal with
check.
that?
Yeah, right. Having to fact check something that I was pretty certain was false, but still have to check on it anyway. It was not what I was expecting to do when I woke up this morning, but, you never know.
Well, this is a situation for Ole Miss fans, and Ole Miss fans, for the large part, understood this. Everybody was freaking out about it, really, except Ole Miss fans, because the reality is, if what had happened, it would not have been 12 hours later before people found out, and they would not have found out about it from a Mississippi State message board because people would have completely melted down by that news. That's how you knew it was false. But you still have to just double check and make sure, especially with the way Lane is about injuries on this team.
Yeah, and he always plays those things pretty close to the chest, right? And us in the media do not really love that, that part of his stuff. But I understand why he does it. I mean, for an advantage standpoint. But yeah, there would have been some other way that this would have been found out outside of a message board like that. That's just kind of how it is. Even with Lane, not talking a lot about injuries, something still would have gotten out. I fully believe, with it being Jaxson Dart. So
it would have gotten if it was anybody, because this is kind of the secret sauce. Because when I worked in that building, when I was the video coordinator at Ole Miss, I wasn't the one talking, but I guarantee you it was the 40 student trainers, the 30 student managers, the 10 student videographers. They're talking. There's nothing to keep them from talking. And that's how it gets out and it spreads throughout the ether, essentially.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of keep a lid on some of that stuff. And Lane does it as well as anybody, honestly, where injuries are concerned, because, there have been times where, we're kind of having to wait and see until Saturday, really, on some injury stuff. But yeah, that would not have been the case with this. And it was really strange, right? Because I wasn't alerted to it until that it was even a rumor, until one of my friends messaged me asking me about it. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then I saw it. And so that's when I started kind of checking on some stuff. And I was pretty quickly told that, no, it's not true.
My manager called me and wanted me to do a quick video, like a lightning video on this thing. And I was like, is this true? Is this going on? I was like, it's not true. There's no way it's true. It's just like rumors and everything. And he's like, well, do a video on this anyway, because this is the talk of the ether on the internet. And I was like, I'm talking to John Macon and a beat writer a little bit later on. He is going to keep me from losing my mind in this situation. If it wasn't for John Macon, I would be absolutely nuts right now. So, but that's the reason I decided to do it this way, because honestly, with the way that Mississippi State fans can be on social media and all of that, I just didn't want to ruin my weekend.
Yeah, stuff like this has a tendency to suck you in a little bit, but I mean, we're as we sit here, 29 days from kickoff. Hopefully we don't have another moment like this, but there's going to be some stuff that naturally fills the void between now and August 31st. So,
well, it's really interesting stuff. We'll change the subject right now to something a little bit more happy. The Georgia game and the Oklahoma games are hard sellouts, completely sold out at this point. There's still Kentucky tickets. There's still Mississippi State tickets that you can get. And of course, the non-conference games are there. I think Ole Miss might end up selling out every game this season.
It's very possible. I think that's very possible. And honestly, one thing that I don't think is talked about a ton as far as the schedule is concerned, I know that this wasn't exactly the focus of this segment, but that first game being at 6 o'clock instead of an 11 o'clock kickoff, I think is going to put more butts in seats than it would have vice versa. No. Because it's still going to be hot. I mean, ungodly hot that day at 6 o'clock in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, but it's not going to be as bad as a noon kickoff. Ole Miss did get some benefits with that as far as those gimme games a little bit. But, we knew looking at the schedule that, the two biggest home games probably this season were going to be Oklahoma and Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I think the fans are really interested in seeing what I think is going to be a talented Oklahoma team, but it's also just a new fan base they get to experience for the first time since '99, I guess. And then Georgia being what it has the potential to be. I mean, it's, we knew those were going to be pretty rowdy atmospheres, and looks like we're being proven right with that.
With all the perspectives and beat reporters that come on my show, I'm probably getting wrong, but I'm talking to either Brad Logan, David Eckert, or Michael Katz earlier in the week. He mentioned that Archie Manning actually talked about the game that he thought would be interesting with people coming in. He thinks that Oklahoma is going to bring about 50,000 people to Oxford.
Yeah, I remember that quote that he was talking about Oklahoma being a really big deal. And I mean, if you're an Oklahoma fan, look at it from their perspective, right? I mean, you have these road SEC games to these new places that you have very rarely, if ever, gone. You need to make trips out of that, I think, if you're that fan base. I think this is going to be a really big year for traveling for Oklahoma fans, just from that perspective. And Texas will probably be the same way.
Yeah, I hate the fact that the Oklahoma game is at 11 a.m. They're not going to get to experience the Grove in all its glory, and they'll come back and say, it's not that big of a deal. Well, it would have been a big of a deal if you weren't walking through it at 8 a.m. But they do get to go and do Saturday night in Tiger Stadium, which is going to be memorable for those guys as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, the Oklahoma fans, they get to experience the Grove after the fact. If they hang around, I mean, that's usually a pretty entertaining scene in and of itself. So, but yeah, that night trip to Tiger Stadium is going to be. I mean, I know this is an Ole Miss podcast, but to me, that's a bucket list college football experience. I think, right, just like the Grove is. I mean, that's a really well-known experience in college football, and I think they'll take a lot from that. Yeah.
Listen, I've been an Ole Miss fan my entire life, and I understand the Ole Miss and LSU rivalry. I've been to see a game between Ole Miss and LSU in Tiger Stadium, I think 3 times. Been down there. Going and watching an Ole Miss LSU game in Tiger Stadium is by far my favorite Ole Miss activity out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah, it's really cool. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to get into fall camp. We got off the subject of fall camp because of what happened today, but we are going to talk about that. We're going to ask John Macon what his people are seeing in Oxford. Anyway, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maximize your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games until college football season starts, and the sports just aren't sportsing the way we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep these sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up any bets that I want anytime I am in the mood. Maybe I want to bet on Ole Miss and their over-under of 9.5 wins this season, or Jaxson Dart at plus 1,500 to win the Heisman, or Ole Miss at plus 1,500 to win the national title. Now I can. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today or Locked On College Sports. They are free 24/7 sports streaming channels programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. So, John, Ole Miss on SI, they've been out at practice. I've been talking to all kinds of people over the course of this week that have actually seen practice and everything's going on. What's the main takeaway that you guys have gotten out of practice so far?
Well, Jaxson Harris has been the guy there for us, and he's seen some stuff that he shared with me. One of his biggest things was Ulysses Bentley's leadership among that running back group. Is really kind of noticeable right now. And yeah, I think you can kind of tell that from some of his quotes at Media Day. But, Jaxson said specifically he saw him coaching guys like Rashad Amos, kind of walking them through stuff like that. I think that's what Ole Miss needs him to be in that room is that leader, that vocal guy. So that's been a big takeaway, and also kind of a fun one. He says that Chris Paul looks like a monster. So that's a good sign for the defense and that linebacker group for sure.
Yeah, and if you've seen pictures and everything, the one thing that has gotten my attention out of the first week of practice probably is that Juice Wells he's a big dude.
Yeah, very large human being. Looks the part for sure. I mean, we know what he's capable of, right? I mean, we've seen that, but seeing it up close and personal in red and blue is a little bit of a different feeling. So yeah, he definitely looks the part here early on, and if he can stay healthy, I expect really, really big things from him for sure.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation in the Ole Miss wide receiver room, because also Deion Smith is about to get eligible and is about to be on the field as well. So, I'm from Simpson County, Mississippi, and my Simpson County math says, well, there's 4 first-round level wide receivers for 3 spots. And I've been trying to figure out and asking everybody, what do you think those 3 receivers are going to be? Who do you think is going to win out?
Personally, and this is just my take, and I'm fine with being wrong. I do not care on this. It's perfectly fine. I do think Deion will be that 4th guy right now. That's kind of my impression. Again, I could be totally wrong, but I really think the continuity of obviously Harris and Watkins there, and then what I think Juice Wells is capable of, I think is almost second to none. So I think Deion will see plenty of playing time this year. I don't really have much concern about that. But if you're talking big 3 guys, I think it's going to be those 3.
Yeah, and if you listen to the podcast this morning, I've talked about offensive line a little bit, not contact, because you can't judge the lines and all that in a helmets practice. But at center, it was at least a little bit interesting because Jerquan Scott was playing center for Ole Miss over Caleb Warren. And my segment this morning was all about how in 2022, when Caleb Warren wasn't available, center was a disaster. In 2023, it was better. It wasn't great. If Jerquan Scott beats out Caleb Warren, this will probably honestly fix the center position. Because if you can count on that, because there's always going to be bumps and bruises and nicks.
Yeah, and we've seen for, I guess, since I've been on the beat, so 7 or 8 years, that offensive line go through a lot of rotation, right? Injuries happen, guys shift around, which is normal for an offensive line. I get it. But I do think that this unit has more depth than I have seen since I've been here. Top to bottom, I think there's guys that can play multiple different positions. And I think when inevitably you have a guy or two who gets hurt, you can weather that storm a little bit right now because of how many good bodies you have in that room. And if Scott's able to win that starting job at center, even if he doesn't, just showing that he's capable of doing it is obviously a really, really big boost.
And before we let you go for this day, it's like, this is going to be the year that Lane Kiffin's going to earn that $9 million, right? With all the expectations and everything, that this is the year.
I think so. I always give the caveat that health is uber important, but I do think this team has enough depth to weather some injuries. But if they are able to stay healthy, I think they're going to achieve a lot of these expectations.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports. It's one of the many reasons we are the number one Ole Miss podcast out there, and thank you for your support on that. And now you can become an Locked On Ole Miss insider in what is sure to be the easiest way to follow Ole Miss sports. It's a texting program where you request to be notified on everything relevant in Ole Miss sports, and you can get this without dealing with all those message board trolls that we were talking about earlier. We're going to add perks to it. We're going to add mailbags and things like that. And it should be really cool. There's a link down below in the description and a 14-day free trial. Hey, John, what do you got going on at Ole Miss on SI over the next couple of days?
A lot of fall camp stuff, obviously, whenever we have access again next week. We're going to be hitting that really hard. Obviously, there's going to be media availabilities after a lot of those, not all of them, but a lot of them. We'll have stuff from that. And as kickoff gets closer, I know everybody's riveted with excitement about this, but we're going to start taking a little bit of a closer look at Furman as well and kind of what they're going to bring on opening weekend. So I know everybody's super thrilled about that, but that is on the agenda.
I'm ready for some Paladins information, honestly.
Absolutely.
I'm planning out already. I've got on the board of basically how my week's going to be set up during the season once we get into game week. And it's like, what we learned on Monday and Keys versus Furman on Tuesday, that type thing of my themes for my shows. So I'm pretty excited. It's getting really close. And this weekend, I got something to handle tonight and tomorrow, but whenever next week hits, man, it's go time.
Yep. It's right here on us, man. I mean, we blink and I'll be in the box at Vaught Hemingway for opening kickoff. I mean, it's really that close.
Doing the pregame show, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We got a lot of cool stuff. Like John Forcade is going to be an analyst this season for me. As Bill Flowers is going to be back as well. We have your pregame show. Brad Logan is going to be on my live shows Tuesday night and stuff like it. It's going to be really cool and honestly fun because that's the whole point of this anyway.
A lot of different perspectives makes for a lot of fun. It really does in this. You're absolutely right.
All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. John Macon Gillespie from Ole Miss on SI joining us this week like he always does. Take care, buddy, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, Steven.